The MET systems in a utility scale solar operating plant are 0.3% of the CapEx.
Wow.
So it's like so little for so much value. I met an independent engineer, I think it was like in Chicago in 2014. He looked at me and he goes, "Oh, this client made millions on your data sets." And when they sold their portfolio. And I was like, really?
Well, Anne, it's good to finally get you here on SunCast. Even if it had to be virtual, I wish that I could be there in Monterey, California. It's such a beautiful place where we first met. Welcome to SunCast.
Thank you, Nico. I was remembering that I think we first met like at a vineyard. So
yes, I'm
neat.
sure it was. It was a feast in the field.
Yes.
My wife was the wine manager, the brand manager for a wine club that I think you were a part of.
Yeah, and we put two and two together that both of us in 2009 or 10 were working in solar. So that was...
Yeah. I believe it was earlier than that, candidly, because I ran Blue Line from 2006 to 2008. And then I was at DRI when we first met from 8 to, 11.
Mm-hmm.
But Betsy left the vineyard it could have been 2009. She left the vineyard in like 2010, 2011. So anyway, back in those days, it was rare to bump into someone in a casual social environment who even understood what we were saying. So even more rare to find someone in Monterey who knew what utility scale solar was at all.
Exactly, yeah.
And you have had to think about explaining what you do a lot. At the core of building any business, it's identifying a problem that needs to be solved. What's the problem that you built your business around? What are you trying to solve for the marketplace?
Initially, we were focused on low uncertainty solar resource measurements. And the idea was by gathering high quality data, we'd be able to help developers to better understand the forecasted energy and then forecasted revenue for their projects. So that was the starting point.
It's effectively hard for developers to get their projects financed around certain assumptions of what the project's going to generate, the yield based on an irradiance that might have been measured from a satellite.
Yeah, initially we were working with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and it was the CPV days, and so they were interested in taking, the components of irradiance, DNI and diffuse. But what we recognized was PV was coming, and if we could just, the satellite data at that time, was 8% uncertainty. That's a lot of uncertainty. Resources, the highest contributing factor to uncertainty in the model. So if we could take a high quality pyranometer at 2.5% and have an independent verification with an overlapping period, we'd be able to help developers better characterize resource. And then we said, okay, so what else can we help de-risk? And so we started measuring PV soiling and albedo for bifacial. And, we always call it with our resource assessment program, we call it the RAY program. And we always say, what else can we put on the Christmas tree to help these owners, right?
Yeah.
To de-risk their project, de-risk construction.
So really at the core of it, the business problem is how do you de-risk a predominantly large scale solar, like many acres, utility scale project that in order to finance needs to have higher accuracy around the yield expectation, the yield forecast on the site. Exactly. With that in mind, introduce for folks who are unfamiliar, GroundWork as a company and how it's built around addressing that core problem. And I'd like for you to maybe take us back to kind of what the market was doing at the time that you began to think, well, this needs to really happen. And I'm curious how the idea originated and how it came to you and all that as well. But kind of unpack for me, like, what is GroundWork and how does it solve this problem?
Yeah, as I said, we started taking measurements with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory on behalf of a developer. It was Iberdrola Renewables at the time, so that's now Avangrid. And started to triangulate the need amongst others, talking, just basically hitting the pavement and talking to people, going to the very first SPI that I attended in 2009 and meeting all the different manufacturers. And then, started getting, a call here and a call there. And I think the idea is sometimes if your door's open and you say you do something, people will call you and say, hey, can you do this? So we got a call I remember from Recurrent Energy, which is still a client today.
Wow.
From 2010 through all of its changes. And we'll talk about how our product line has expanded and service lines expanded. But we got a call from Recurrent and they were like, we bought these stations. Can we send them to you to put in? It was like, and then I looked at that and said, okay, these guys are sitting in skyscrapers in San Francisco. They don't want to be managing a bunch of equipment. They don't want to be, putting up fencing and hiring somebody to clean a pyranometer. And, that doesn't make sense. They've got to do this modeling. They've got to do deals. They've got to do permitting. They have to do interconnect. Let me just take this headache entirely away. So that was one side of it. The other side of it was the wind industry. Nobody was trusting the data sets. And we saw these guys, like two guys in a truck, throwing up anemometers and, with no rigor. And I knew from my investment banking days that because I used to have to look at loan portfolio's as an analyst. And the quality of the data mattered for where we were going to price the deal, So I was like, if you don't trust that data, how could you then go to Wall Street and get project financing? So that was another big connection too. They weren't just trying to understand, they were trying to understand the pro forma for the project, but they were also going and getting financing. And so they needed, data in the data room that they could trust.
I'm still trying to put myself in the place, like you mentioned that you were in investment banking. Like, I'm trying to figure out how in the aughts it occurred to you that there was an opportunity in renewables. Like, it's great that Iberdrola, which, by the way, like, for those who are unfamiliar, like, to have Iberdrola as your first client is kind of like, oh, First Solar was my first client, or like some massive, like, Iberdrola is a massive company. So, I was working in, I was in, that's where like the personal story comes into play, right? I was working in LA. I was running a delivery organization in digital marketing of 500 people. And I had just come off of maternity leave. And actually, I'd been in a position where I was part of the leadership team that had sold the company to a strategic buyer. And that strategic buyer, the minute they signed the deal, I knew my days were numbered, right? Because they had their own people that they'd brought in. So I was kind of in LA hiding out because I had a 3-year-old and was pregnant. And my husband at the time was doing wind farm development in Arizona. And so he had put up a few wind towers. And he'd gotten connected with Iberdrola, with Jesse Groner from Triple Oak Power, and who's now at Triple Oak Power, and is now who my ex-husband works for. And so we were, looking at, Arizona as a great place to develop, wind farms in northern Arizona. And at the same time, they had this request for, hey, we're going to try to take some solar measurements. We might get into solar, So John, he went to work for a different developer. It started from some guys that were working at Iberdrola. And there was just this like services business that was just kind of sitting there, with these stations. And so I was like, hey, I think I can make a business out of this, not get up at 7 a.m., not go deal with like this company that doesn't want me to be here anyway. As the story goes, I was coming off of maternity leave and was the day I was coming off maternity leave, at my previous company, my boss who was in Chicago was like, hey, I'm going to fly in and meet you at the hotel. I was like, and I called, Darren Prock, who's now my CFO. And I said, hey, Darren, I think he's going to fire me. He doesn't, Darren's like, no, like the place is falling apart. Like, we need you. Like, are you kidding? I was like, no. I think he's firing me. And I showed up at that hotel and certain enough, he looked at me
And he said, we're going to let you go. And, this is my first day back off maternity, baby with nanny,
Man.
was like, yeah. And I like looked at him and he looked at me, this guy, and I'm not going to say his name because of what he said. He goes, I was talking with my wife and we really thought you'd be happier at home with your baby.
Oh my
Can you
goodness.
believe that? And
How
I
benevolent.
was like, and I just looked at him and I was like, what? I went directly to John's office and we were working with an attorney for him to go to work at Element Power, which is where he went to work.
Right.
And I said, I wonder if they've got like a labor attorney there.
Right.
And I had a guy on the phone that afternoon and was like, and just made a few phone calls to the HR department and said, this is what he said. And he didn't deny it. And, and then I was like, okay, so, I really think I can make a business. I mean, literally that day was when I was like, I'm going to take over these stations. Like they've got a tiny bit of revenue associated with them. How hard can it be to take ambient temperature measurements and irradiance measurements, right?
Yeah. Well, what were people doing at the time, right? Like, so put us in that time period. How were measurements being captured?
There were no measurements, right?
None.
So there wasn't, it was the...
This 2009,
there's no utility scale solar built. So in addition to the Iberdrola stations, we actually had some that we were doing on behalf of AWS, which is now UL.
Right.
So I mean, probably we were the only commercially set up stations like in the country at the time,
How did you charge for it? Like, how did you decide how to productize this thing at all?
That's so funny, guys. So yeah, I mean, it's funny, things have changed over time, but we were like, okay, just like anything, like, okay, so how much does it cost to do it? Okay, what's the margin to put on it, right? And then therefore, here's what we're going to sell it for.
Were you selling the units or were you selling the service? Because you were selling it as a...
So I knew how to manage services businesses. So I was selling the service, installation, and maintenance. And then Enrail was doing the data quality.
I want to make sure I understand. You were selling them the equipment. And then you were managing
at the time I wasn't selling the equipment. And then then I took in, so then I realized so then this is funny how it ends up happening. So Enrail goes away, right? Because those creators exist for everybody. And then and then we realized that, okay, because these guys had all set up meteorology departments for wind groups. And they were all like losing the data and not QCing the data. And we were like, if we're going to do this right, it has to be, we have a solar specific MET station. We have the hooks in that station to do the diagnostics to really understand the quality of the data as it's happening. And then we then started QCing the data sets themselves using, some of the methodologies that we learned from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So that's how we started with the services and then expanded it to the equipment and to the data. And that's the business today. We sell our MET stations. We have a 8,000 square foot facility still in LA and Burbank, California.
Amazing.
And then we have national field services. So, we perform MET specific visits of, 70, upwards of 70 a month, and with specifically trained team all on MET. And then we have a data platform. So we have a cloud-based data platform where we do all of our automatic QC, automatic report generation, and it produces daily viz. So our data science team can look at the data. And so now I can turn around to that owner and say, you're not going to have any gaps in your data. You're not going to miss July because somebody didn't clean that sensor, and that then, that turned into 98% irradiance availability for the data set, the quality of the data that goes. And we're the only company that reports that. And on the resource assessment side, over 1,000 completed MET campaigns. At any one time, we've got active 175 to 200 MET campaigns across the country.
Could you elaborate a bit on the challenges early on that you faced educating the industry on the value of these services? And what were some of the pivotal moments that validated the need for groundwork in the market?
So, of course, nobody wants to pay for anything in development, right? These guys are all like, the capital's expensive.
Yeah.
And, I was like, well, this is cheaper than, lawyers. This is cheaper than, So that was like, kind of like, if you're doing, different development functions on a project, right? I knew it was, it was in line with that. That's another way to compare yourself. Like, what percent is your service of, the overall budget for whatever this, set of activities are, right? And we do that today. So we haven't talked about the construction side yet, but the cost of the MET systems in a utility scale solar operating plant are 0.3% of the CapEx.
Wow.
So it's like so little for so much value. This was where the moment I knew. I met an independent engineer, I think it was like in Chicago in 2014. Maybe, I can't remember where SPI was that year. And he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, this client made millions on your data sets." And when they sold their portfolio. And I was like, "Really?"
Really? Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, "Ah." And so that was just such a moment. It's a business moment in time that I never forget. Like, because now I'm always like, okay, what's the 10x value on this? So, spend, tens of thousands of dollars with groundwork on a resource assessment campaign, reduction of uncertainty if you can, actually increase the expected output, by doing better soil measurements and better by albedo measurements. These guys, when you go and have like $100 million, CapEx expense and, huge pro forma, you're going to save millions, right?
Right.
And so a friend of GroundWork, who we've been working with since the very beginning, Armando Solis from Lightsource VP, Armando, right?
I know him well.
Yeah, he did a presentation last year at PVPMC, which we'll talk about that hopefully as part of this. And just said, it's worth millions, right? They could do the math. It's like, right, so that then becomes like a guiding star for the company, right? North Star for the company, right? Like, everything we add is intentional and has to create value for the customer.
I would love to see your pitch deck too, because I could see how you would be able to say, on a dollar for dollar basis, there are like, here's what the stack looks like of all the money you have to spend. And I'm going to argue in this pitch that you have to spend this money. And by the way, if we do a waterfall of the dollars in the order that you should prioritize them, you should prioritize them for what's the lowest expense that gets me the biggest gain. And I guarantee you that today's meeting is going to explain exactly what that expense is. And like, how do you lose if you're making that argument? That's like, once you figure that out, like, 0.3% of your overall project expenditure is going to drive billions of dollars in financing.
And, now we have other lower cost providers in the market. And we got resource assessments, my established business. So we got to talk about everything else, but we got lower cost providers in the market, and we had a customer that's just onboarded with GroundWork, and going back to that original idea, take the pain away and like be turnkey. And so this other provider had just left these MET stations, fielded for years post campaign, and had it continued to charge for the service. And one of the things I said to them is, you could have used this equipment, because we reuse the equipment in the program. So we have a whole process which makes the next project that we put the MET system on, the equipment cost is 16% of the original cost, right? Because we're just doing some refurb to the
right.
And that's just part of making it sticky and being a great partner, right? And that's not an easy business to run, is a refurb business, let me tell you. But we do it. And but they had left, these stations around, and for this other provider, and I was like, you could have gotten like 3 campaigns in those 3 years, like, so you could have done this like 3 times, right? So,
wow, man.
So that's how we talk about it a little bit now, is, because because now you have more market entrants, and we talk about like the quality of our data sets, no gaps, high irradiance availability, and then we're there, we're moving, we're going to get you to your next project.
So part of what we unpacked initially here is like, how do you think about productizing a business or a service that doesn't exist, and then how do you expand to not only keep up with the pace of the market, but to ensure that you can keep a share of market when other market interests come in and do the only natural thing, they try to undersell you by price. Could you talk a bit about the ways that you have found opportunities in the market to have logical product line expansion, what that looks like, and how how you went about grabbing that market share as well, sort of pulling that into the GroundWork scope?
You remember like 2012, 2013, you're like, oh, I think all the sites have been built.
Yeah.
I remember, and I was like, okay, so they're going to start building. It was like, because it was like empty fields, right, with met stations. I always like think it's like a Don Quixote thing, right? Like just these empty fields, and so I was like really afraid that this resource assessment business was going to go away. And we got we had a gentleman join GroundWork, our vice president of technology, Justin Robinson. He had a great experience from, SCADA, like Draker and Campbell Scientific, and really was just passionate. He still is the most passionate about solar resource. And he got a call from Copper Mountain Solar 3, which was being built in southern Nevada, very early utility scale solar plant.
Right.
And it was like, we want to put MET systems in the plant to then monitor performance. And I was like, okay, like, let's do that. And so we got it. Now we had to come up with a whole design for what that was going to look like, and how we were going to change the product to be able to do ongoing performance monitoring. So that was our big leap into a brand new market and into the EPC
it occurs to me as you're explaining this, we didn't explain to the listener that the product that you're selling is something that needed to go into a field years before the project is built.
Yeah.
Could you just make sure we bring people up to speed on that, like the nature of the business?
Clear, yeah, it was in development. So it was a great name for the company, GroundWork, too. A lot of times we were the first people on site from that, and so we take very seriously how we represent our owners, our developers, when we're on the site with landowners and locals. Like, we have training for our field staff on that, because we want to be very questions. Be very positive about solar
but how often, like how far in advance of a project getting built are you guys typically going out?
Yeah, generally it's extending now because project sizes are bigger, and it's good to take longer term data sets with climate change and just the amount of money on the line. So we're there like 2 years to 3 years ahead of the.
I remember when you first told me this, it completely blew my mind. I was like, what do you mean? But this was like, you have to put it in perspective. The reason that, like what Anna was talking about a minute ago, is that early days, it was CPV, and concentrating solar had to be even more exacting, because if you were even a 0.5% off, it was detrimental.
And that's why I thought that technology wasn't going to make it. It wasn't because of price and cost and complexity and everything. I was like, this D&I is like really finicky, right?
Yeah, you could be a half a degree. I remember the Greenvolts guys. One of my buddies' son worked at Greenvolts, and he said that if the reflector, the mirror, was a half of a degree off, it dropped 95% efficacy.
Yeah.
And then like, oh my God, well, that makes perfect sense.
You start looking at, you can look at clouds all day and be like, well, that's not D&I, that's not D&I. So, and that means, like, just for our listeners, that means direct normal incidence. That's like the direct beam coming,
the amount of sunlight coming in, directly to the cell, to the receiver. So we started
building MET systems for our operating plants. And then we were like, okay, so these have to be maintainable for 30 years. And
you now no longer are there for 3 years and move on. This is a permanent installation.
They're now it's not a remote power unit. It's an uninterruptible power supply, because you're going to have AC power to the system.
Are you still selling the equipment and running the service?
So now we're started to make them, right? So we're and then we still do that today, right? So we have hundreds of units a year we sell across all of our systems. So
yeah, so at that point it makes sense for the customer to own it. That's kind of like the printer business, right? At that point, because or just
and
like
so
the
we
monitoring business.
equipment and services supply.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah,
the interesting thing is so at the time the developer was taking the project to NTP and then generally flipping it to another party, right?
right.
So they hadn't stood up all the IPPs at the time.
Yeah.
And so it was going to the constructor. And so it was going to the constructor and then somebody else was going to own it. So it's in the developer's best interest to try to juice the project, right, if you will. And then it was in the constructor's best interest to do it in the cheapest way possible. And then this poor guy at the end ends up owning the asset, right? But what the neat thing that's happened and why our measurements matter so much more in this scenario now than they used to is the same owner that's developing the project is going to own the project after the constructor builds the project. And so what our client in that case during that phase of the project is actually the constructor. So we work with every major constructor in the United States. The Solves, the Mortensons, the Kewitts, the Primorises,
Right.
and what our value proposition to them is, again, Matt, so kind of a headache. You're there to put modules up. Let us come in and in a specialized way, make sure this is put correctly in the right place with the right instrumentation, so that we can successfully get you through capacity testing and hand it right back over to that owner for operations, right? So our goal in that phase of the project is to make sure that the plant is properly instrumented so that we can optimize performance in the future. So we really think of our owner as still being our end client. And that's really important to us. And then with that constructor, it's, we're there when you need us. If there's an issue, we're going to be there. I always say there's two most important, there's many important points, but a couple of important points in our, the life cycle of a solar plant is when that project's getting financed, it's all hands on deck at GroundWork. When that project's in capacity testing, it's all hands on deck at GroundWork, right? So, and that's what everybody kind of understands is our marching orders. So
there are three main areas that you guys focus on measurement, right? Irradiance, albedo, and soiling losses. Can you talk about all three of those?
And then we have all the ancillary measurements too now, and
Great.
we also measure hail. So we do hail monitoring. Yeah, so irradiance, most important, that's the resource. We measure that at horizontal to compare against the models that were done to take the plant into operation. It also compares against the satellite data. So everybody has horizontal irradiance measurements. That's called GHI. And then POA is and there's actually RPOA too, but POA is plane of array. So that's a pyranometer that's mounted along the array. And then the other thing that we're pioneering and I think is very important is we have full size, what we call reference modules. So we take a module, again, at about every 30 megawatts within an operating plant. And that module is characterized at our lab because we have a lab in Albuquerque, formerly CFV Labs, with independent third-party flash test data. And that's the lowest uncertainty because that's measuring the front side and the back side. And it's a module that is the same, same as a production module. And our owners are finding that's a great way to not only go through capacity testing, but then do ongoing performance monitoring. So that today is, what is our, what we recommend for operating plants. So we have that alongside of our horizontal measurements.
And then there's also diffuse light. And one of the things that we saw be like kind of the biggest driver in utility scale, I remember back when I was at Trina, we had dual glass and like bifacial modules and nobody would buy them. And everybody was like, no, that's a European thing. But all of a sudden we had this big sort of boom of bifacial in the US where you had to measure two things, You had to better understand diffuse light because you had to figure out how to capture it from everywhere. And then you had to better understand how it bounces off of things. Can you talk about like that being a
So
piece that you were
again,
like, oh,
using a
we're
reference
there.
module.
We could do this.
Using a reference module gets rid of that entire uncertainty stack. So that's
How?
because you have uncertainty in every single one of those measurements.
Yeah.
But the way we do that today, as I said, as we started the conversation, we're a very low percent of CapEx, right?
Uh-huh.
So understanding the resource is really, really important. So most of our customers take a diffuse measurement using a diffuse instrument. They take horizontal measurements like I spoke about. They've got reference modules, and then they also are taking the plane of array, but then also the rear plane of array, which is a pyranometer mounted on the underside that's capturing what's bouncing off of the ground of exactly what the backside is seeing. And then albedometers. So albedometers are measuring up and measuring down. So everything is in pursuit of, modeling, right? And getting good modeling inputs. And I think the industry will converge on this, right? And that's what we want to be at the forefront of with the research that we do, is to help the industry converge. So, I never want to over-instrument because it just becomes more maintenance and it also just doesn't get maintained, right? So we want to have the right amount.
And then the third element that impacts the long-term yield, of course, is not how much sun hits the panel, but whether or not all of that sun's absorbed by the panel, because if it's dirty, it's not absorbing solar. Everybody puts what, 2% in their models for soiling losses?
Not anymore because we've got soil measurement systems. So we take soil measurements pre-construction, and pretty neat. We closed the loop on that recently with looking at operating plant data and comparing it relative to our estimates when we did with our pre-construction resource assessment, and they were really dead on. So it's pretty neat to see then the soiling measurements in an ongoing operating plant actually tying back to our original original soiling hypothesis for the plant. Soiling, you also have backup module temperature. You want to understand what you're losing due to temperature loss. So we measure the backup module temperature and then that gets converted to cell temp estimates, so that they can understand the losses due to temperature, right? So we're trying to characterize, and this is where we'll maybe talk about modules too. We're trying to characterize, what the model is, but then any source of loss, right? Before you get to then module degradation, which is an area that I'm highly focused on. And then you have losses due to other things like clipping and all the other losses that you have as part of plant operations and the design of your plant. So, but we are laser focused on, really quantifying and then allowing owners then to optimize, areas of loss.
You've been doing this now for more than 15 years. You've had a lot of success. What was the hardest thing that you've had to do as a CEO?
The hardest thing that I've had to do as a CEO is probably just make hard decisions to scale with regard to staff, right? The people that you start the business with aren't necessarily the people that you need to take, all the way to grow, to scale the business. Because, the people I work with, I just love, right?
It's like a family.
They become a family. So that I think is the hardest, part of the business. I think you have to really,
and knowing what to say no to as well, right? Because you guys sort of dabbled in product development and kind of think about
that's coming around. Yeah, we did dabble in product development. So knowing what to say no to is being laser focused on utility scale solar and on measurements was, very, very, kind of grounding for the company. And I think helped make us so successful, which was saying no to other things. We get a lot of R&D ideas, right? Let's put nets over and see if that helps with hail. Can you guys test that? Let's spray the ground with something and see if we get better bifacial results, right? And it's okay, because you want to do these things for these owners, right? But at the same time, you have to say okay, can I then do that for a lot of owners? Can I do that for a lot of projects? And so we have to make those decisions too, right? And sometimes those conversations are hard. We also have had to and this is more recently, we've got, some product in the market that it isn't reliable, but owners are wanting, and so having to turn and say no, and say no, it's a business decision for us not to support this product because a few years ago it cost me a lot of money to try to stand behind this product, and so you've got to really pick your suppliers. It's so important to pick your suppliers in a really thoughtful way. We have an outdoor test site in Logan, Utah, that we started with Justin.
No way.
And it was and we test every sensor from every manufacturer of any of the measurements that we take. Yeah. And
why Logan? I'm so curious.
So
I
Justin's
have a
in Logan.
there.
Campbell Scientific was in Logan, and so we've got we got 4 or 5 different people up in Logan.
Interesting.
Utah.
I didn't know that.
And there's a bike race. I'm gonna do a plug right now. The Loaded Jaw bike race. It's in the fall, and it's from Logan to Jackson, and that's when we raise money for our corporate charity, which is We Care Solar. So,
you guys support We Care.
Plug for everybody. Have you heard of We Care Solar?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I had the founder on our inaugural SunCast summit during the pandemic when we were all
you're
sitting
kidding.
Yeah.
Cameron chat. I haven't yet to meet her. I'm excited to do that someday. But yeah,
she's fantastic.
Yeah, when we started, being more intentional about our charitable giving as a company, in kind of the run up to going for B Corp, because GroundWork's a B Corp as well.
Yeah.
We actually had a committee, and then we selected different charities, and We Care Solar, came out on top. And so
That's
we've
great.
now, I think, it's been a number of years that there are all our donations go to We Care Solar.
One of the things that I've heard you talk, that you and I talked about that I want to make sure we really dig into. I asked you sort of what was one of the hardest things you had to do as a CEO. I know that one of the hardest decisions that you had to make was, how do I capitalize a business that I've been the sole owner and founder and CEO of if I really want to grow? There's so much opportunity out there, but cash flow from these kinds of businesses doesn't in and of itself allow you to just go and grow. And it's hard to wrap your hands around the growth opportunity when you're limited by your own cash flow. So would you talk to me about the process, the decision that led to Limerock New Energy's investment in GroundWork?
I was going to say that was like the hardest thing, but it actually wasn't. And that's why I was like, and maybe because, it's just gone so remarkably well. And you have so much, you've always said, take luck, right? Is one of your phrases that I love to say. And I took a lot of luck during that process, I tell you. And so it really went exceptionally well. So I can't really say it was the hardest thing I ever did.
In hindsight's 2020, but
hindsight's totally 2020. Yeah. Well. So I started working with a banker, and it was a really funny story. Cameron, employee number 4, my California friend who grew up down in Santa Ynez. Her father was a very successful businessman, and so I was like, hey, I'm going to need somebody to help me if I'm going to, go and raise capital. And I'm always like, what would Ken do? That's her dad's name. I was like, can you call your dad and see if he knows anybody?
Yeah.
So she did, and he connected me with this gentleman that lived down in the Santa Ynez Valley, and that's not it's not like LA or New York where a bunch of investment bankers are. And it turns out that this guy, Michael Grenier, was. And there's another Michael Grenier in the industry, so this is a different one.
That's so funny. I was thinking, I was like,
wait. Probably thinking, like, I know that guy, right? So Michael Grenier was in my same class at university in 1992, and he knew me. He knew my roommates. He knew exactly who I was. And he was like, I can't believe that we've been connected from Cameron, right? Like the universe works in mysterious ways, right? So Michael was like, it was very fortunate to meet him because, first of all, I really liked that. Like, he knew that this was my baby, right? And that I wasn't like a serial entrepreneur. I was exactly his age, exactly the same stage in my life.
Yeah.
So it was just, and he thought like me a lot, which is pretty crazy. But, it had gone into investment banking out of Penn. He was at Wharton, but he really, he got me. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just because of that, that complete shared history, but he totally got me. So he took us through but the decision to do it was exactly what you said. Total addressable market is increasing rapidly. Owners all have, billions in funding. I have too many ideas for how to help them that I need money to execute upon.
I
right?
know.
I have competitive threats. So that led me to start to work with Michael. And he was like, this is how we're going to do this. I'm going to put together, a sim, and, we're going to go out to this many. And it was just an excellent way to go about it. And what was neat was, he had all of these, kind of general private equity contacts, right? Because he was not from the renewable energy industry, but I had a lot of renewable energy, finance and private equity contacts. And so I kind of tapped in and I said, let's add these folks to the list, because they approached me before. I think they would be interested. But the interesting thing was a girlfriend of mine who's a VC, Jackie Kosman. I called her and I was like, Jackie, I don't have enough, climate, tech, impact, renewable, folks that are on the list. And so we called it the Jackie tranche. She's at Congruent. They back like Raptor Maps and totally. So she talks to her managing partner, and he's like, "Oh, I've got the right people for you." And so he connected us with Limerock New Energy, and they came in at like the 11th hour into the process, which was really neat because it's just about people, right? Like you people that you feel like you can partner and work with, and it was it was pretty and because of Michael, and he's like, well, the process is we're going to get indications of interest here, and we're going to have management presentations. You're going to do 4 management presentations in 4 days with dinners every night. I was like, this is crazy. It's Christmas. Like, I have presents to wrap. Right? Okay, let's do it. Right? We pushed it. And it ended up, even through the process of due diligence, we could see with Limerock that they were just so thoughtful in how they were looking at our business. They brought in a third party to do a market research survey and go and investigatively interview all of our customers and prospects and understand exactly, and all that information then we could use from day one to start growing the business. So I can't say enough about Mark Lewis and his team. They've just been a fantastic partner. And now we just reached our 1-year anniversary, which was April 12th, which is my birthday. So we closed last year on my birthday. So that was super fun. Yeah.
Do you think they knew it was your birthday?
So I think the lawyers might have known. I don't know. I've never really said to Mark, did you know it was my birthday? But I think it kind of, because they get all your information about your entire life, right, when they're doing it. So I think that we were kind of careening towards my birthday, and I think they said, okay, my birthday was a Friday, so it was good day to close, right? Now it's
That's fantastic. I'll have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I think my birthday this year is going to be on a Monday, so I've got 5 more years before I can sell the company. Dang it. It's actually, as I'm listening to you tell your story, though, I'm thinking to myself, and I know tons of entrepreneurs who are in this situation. It's well, there's never been a better time to grow. Yeah. I have so many ideas for my customers.
So many ideas, right?
That I can't deliver even with my own existing team who I love. And there are companies that I'm partnering with, tangential to. We always have conversations about collaborations. I want to create a big mega company.
Yeah.
It's I'm fascinated.
Neat too is, and that begs the next question. When you put together that, your strategy, it makes you really think, okay, I got to start and I do this all the time. Am I working on my business or in my business? Trying to really get the team, to work.
Yeah.
And, I still do a fair amount in the business, but on the business, it has to be important too. But, as part of that, we worked on our, the starting of a corporate strategy, which is really to be that single source of reference data for these operating plant owners and start to, aggregate these data sets and help them to then further optimize and do more with data and digitization and automation, while gathering, data from remote sensing, right? Which is what, we do. So that's the thesis, for the business on a move forward basis, is we can be even more valuable to these owners, as they operate these assets for the next 30 years. So with that, I was like, okay, so if I could, if I had money, right, who else would I want to partner with? And that's where, Jim Crimmins and CFV Labs came into the mix.
The guys in New Mexico.
And so they're based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's just a brilliant team. And they've just been like us, just laser focused on doing really, really high quality third party characterization of modules. And that's the sun hits the module, right? So it's like, and that's the model,
Yeah.
So understanding both that data, really, really well is important, and it's going to get more important.
That reminds me, you guys do a thing down, I think, in New Mexico every year. It's like an annual, I don't know, like a summit for your customers now, it seems like. It's an acronym, and I can never remember what it means.
I can't take credit for it. So it was started with Sandia National Laboratories.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and it still is. They're the host.
So it happens at Sandia.
Yeah. So no, it doesn't actually. So it was used to be, at a hotel in Albuquerque, and it was, a bit of research, a little bit of industry, a lot from university and research community.
What's it called? Can you start there?
It's called PVPMC, the Photovoltaic Performance Modeling Collaborative, and it's a workshop. And in 2020, we were asked to host it, and CFV had been hosting it prior to that because they're based in Albuquerque, where Sandia is. So it was just another reason why, Jim and I, we were already like, hey, we're both trying to help the industry, so we took over hosting it in 2020 and went and called all of our clients and said, hey, come join this, because it's like, and present, and then the constructors started coming too, which is important because they need to understand for capacity testing and how to building the plants, this as well. So, so now it taps out at 300. We're already,
like you cap it?
Because it's very workshopy. If you ever look at it, like everybody's in the room. It's not networky. It's like everybody's in the room, like learning and typing, and so we want to make sure it's intimate enough for, for the. But what's neat is because we're doing it with Sandia, and because it's completely. We actually took sponsors this year, but we don't do it to make money. Like it's not like it's not like a.
Just to make it a better experience.
We're not an event business, right? So we really try to keep the ticket price low so that our owners and constructors and anybody can send a lot of their team, and it's a really good opportunity for them to be together and talk about as a team about how they're approaching their work. So I think performance engineer is such an interesting job that all these folks have gotten into, our clients, because it really had there's no university courses on this, right? It's all been learning PV modeling, looking at the latest models, Plant Predict, understanding resource, understanding plant design. They've just got it's just such a multidisciplinary skill set. So
it's fascinating as I learn more about PVPMC. It reminds me of a common. I'm going to call it a marketing tactic, but it's certainly a strategy used by large corporate. Famously, Inbound is the HubSpot conference for all intents and purposes, but it's a customer forum. It's an opportunity to get the folks that are users of your product in the same room. It doesn't matter that HubSpot's not trying to get folks from operations, not trying to get folks from accounting, they're trying to get marketers in the room, right? And there just aren't enough meeting spaces in our industry where the folks that do a particular thing, right? The folks that model yield, the folks that model finances, the folks that work on, like right now as we record, many of our friends are down at the Solar Asset Management or Asset Management North America, formerly known as SAMNA, which has grown as the go-to place if you're in asset management, right? Talk a bit about the nature of how your product or I'm calling it yours, even though I know it's not technically your event, but PVPMC has sort of evolved as a customer forum where the folks that you serve most all meet together in one room. And I want to hear about kind of how well, like what's the size of an event like this and why do you feel like it creates a more collaborative environment?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that it really, it's not just GroundWork's event. It's Sandia National Laboratories event. And we've been honored to be the steward of the event for the past few years. And I think it's just a very permissive environment. So it's not only just GroundWork as a measurement company, but it's also all the modeling software. So PVSYST is there, and Plant Predict is there with Terabase, and so you have everybody that kind of contributes to modeling attending. And Sandia, I think, has done a great job of crafting, those key attributes of modeling and getting them together. And then I think what GroundWork was good at doing, and if we can hang our hat on anything, we brought in those performance engineers in a wider way.
Right.
It had
like made it interesting and invited them in.
Yeah. Yeah, invited them in and made sure they knew about it and really promoted it. The way that the format is laid out is, we have and Josh Stein and his team have done a fantastic job of setting, certain topics, and then we have a call for abstracts. We take it very seriously, and we receive abstracts in January. And across those topics, then select like the top 4 or 5 presenters, for that. Everybody gets a short period of time to do a presentation, and then a large Q&A period of time.
Cool.
And what gave me the chills about the workshop, I'll just say this, was when I looked across the room, and there was no sidebar conversations. Everybody had a laptop up and was just taking notes as different people were presenting. Because it's just, everybody's getting so much great information in one place.
So folks are presenting on real world examples, right? Like project data, hurdles overcome, things like that.
Yeah, it has to have, kind of a research aspect to it. And, the bar is set pretty high.
It's like all case studies, basically.
Yes. So, and all the independent engineers attend. So, that includes, DNV, Luminate, IFC, all the different, and then you have the research facilities. So NREL sends a delegation, universities send folks. We actually have Cameron and Josh worked on the ability to send students free. With some of the ticket sales, so that we could really make sure we keep the university and research community attached to the event as well.
I want to talk a bit about the team that you've built around GroundWork, because while you've achieved notoriety, arguably the top company in your category, the category you created, how many people does it take to run a company like this overall now, like the size you are now?
The company size now is 130 team members.
Wow.
And yeah. And you remember when it was 4.
I do. I remember my dear friend from grad school being the 4th hire, I think Cam was, right?
Yeah, Cameron was the 4th hire. So
yeah, referring to Cameron Hunter for those who are
Cameron
familiar
Hunter, she's our EVP of corporate development.
Right.
Yeah, she was the 4th hire. And it was, she and I were like, generating proposals, ordering equipment, checking local technician logs, and going out for a run, in the afternoon back in the day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
In the early stage of sort of startup growth phase, you have to be really careful about how you spend time and money. One of those is in hiring. How did you think in those early days about the right butts to get on the bus, right? Like talk about a bit like maybe finding Cam and some of the other early team members that really made a difference.
Yeah, so I had come from the end of the .com era, and I had gone through a period where I personally had been part of the team that conducted like 20 rounds of layoffs of a professional services company. So I did not want to do that ever.
Right.
So I was very careful, with every single hire to make sure we had the money to make payroll. I remember having a conversation with Justin Robinson, and he'd come from a company that had a round of layoffs, and it was a bit of a larger company. And I said, what I will tell you, Justin, is that, you will never get this like tap on the shoulder, right? Like, I will be transparent with you about, what's coming in and, because my goal is always make payroll, right? And, and I think that really helps you make, the right, very careful with every hire. It also makes you careful with, and we talked about this earlier, making the hard call to let folks go if it's not working out, right? Yeah. So, because you can't have any, B- players, right? I don't want to, but you can't have anybody that, isn't top performing, because otherwise it lets the whole team, the small team down, right? Puts work on other folks, right? So.
Not only does it put work on other folks, but it lets other folks see that there's not a center of gravity towards excellence. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're, we talk about GroundWork as being, quality, quality is like our, embedded in our brand, right? Highly embedded in our brand. And so that goes with everything, with every email, with every data set, with every human interaction, it has to be high quality. Yeah.
So hand in hand with like being selective, take your time to hire, there's also almost always a story or two in there of like the non-standard, non-traditional hire that worked out. Can you give me an example? And I kind of want to dig into maybe your thought process around training and hiring, like training people up to the role rather than hiring specific to the role. Are there examples of folks in your team that maybe weren't like trained for the role when they came in?
Well, so nobody knows about Met Gear for the utility scale solar industry. So every hire, has to be, and actually now people come to us and know about Met Gear, which is amazing. Like that's like for kind of next level. But yeah, Justin was like the first hire that actually knew like what, was the stuff that we did.
Knew what you guys were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, exactly. But, when we hire we're hiring project managers, people didn't have, meteorological experience, med equipment experience, or solar experience for that matter, right? So, I always just hire for, work ethic and grit and, intellect and, and intellectual curiosity. Those are like, the things you need to hire for. And a couple of fun examples are, one is I hired my babysitter, to come in as an admin, and so I saw how she was like babysitting my kids and like working 3 jobs, and I was like, that obviously she could come help me, right? And
I'll help her consolidate her balance sheet a little.
Exactly. And what's really, really neat about that is now she runs our entire production facility down in Los Angeles. Yeah, totally. So, honestly,
she's a lifer now.
It's one of the lowest touch. She does such a fantastic job. She's a natural manager of people. She's a natural leader. It's
the kind of person that can help you transfer culture, like place to place. Like you were mentioning, I think she moved her to LA, right?
Yeah, she was in Monterey and moved to LA. And I remember saying to her when she moved down there, I was like, you got to bring the energy we have up here down there. And she did, and she's done that. In Utah, interestingly, we have some fantastic leadership in Utah with Justin and Julie, and then Steve Knapp, my COO. But there's a woman there who came to us from Solar City because they were based there, right? Amy Phelan, and she really brought the culture. So sometimes you don't know who, right, is the person that kind of embodies like the great, the good energy. And then everybody, rallies around that. Salt Lake has a different culture to Sand City. But they have kickball team, and they go out and do Top Golf, and they've got a great energy there too. And they're much more of an activist and outdoorsy group in that city. So I feel like culture you have to honor where it takes you. But
so you've highlighted some of the core qualities that you look for in a team and how you build a culture. And I'm curious, how do you cultivate that culture as the team expands from 4 to 40 to 100 plus?
I mean, that's like communication, and like say it again, and say it again. So, we were always virtual from day one. As you know, it would be expensive to transfer everybody into Monterey, California, from a housing perspective. So we started in 2017 using Zoom, well before the pandemic. I was working with an accountant that was based in Florida, and he was always like, put the video on. He's like, we can really have a better conversation, right? And so I'm pretty big on put the video on, let's see each other, right?
Yeah.
And then we have, series of meetings that are with departments who are collaborating, and then kind of roll up into a monthly all hands that I conduct, where every single member of GroundWork gets on, on the first Friday of a month. And we have a bit of an executive report out. But then we have a showcase where somebody within the company shares great work that they've been doing. And that takes up a full half of the conversation. And I think that really helps to, kind of drive home the culture, and the culture of, honoring work, not just done by executives or sales, right? Big sales are always exciting from a report out perspective, but also just like, hey, I just automated this reporting process, and here's how it works, right? So, we honor everybody up and down the company, and no effort's too small.
How do you surface those stories internally and choose which ones get shared at all hands?
What comes to mind immediately is we all use Slack, and we have a channel called Being Better Together. And so it was started by Steve, our COO, and he's our kind of organizational behavior guru at the company. And what we do on that channel is you share something work that's been done, and we always try to frame it in the context of the company's values. So we have our 6 GroundWork values. And so generally you use that language, right? Common language is so important when you communicate your Being Better Together story. And so that's a way we kind of surface some of that. And then it's also just, department leads saying, hey, we hit this milestone. We'd like to do a presentation. And, there's also that too. So
how do you memorialize those 6 values? Is that something that I imagine is something that you as the CEO could recite by memory, but where and how are they reinforced internally in the company such that people can remember them?
It's interesting that the channel's probably the largest source. It's most in front of people all the time because it's being posted to every single week. It's in our onboarding materials. I use that language when I'm talking on our all hands. But just to talk through them really quick, because I love talking about our values. They're little couplets. So the first is being trustworthy and caring. So in the early days, we'd always be like, goodness, we care about people's data more than they do, right? But then we kind of turned that and said, really, we care about solar, we care about the planet, we care about our people, we care about the client, our clients, and of course, we also care about their data. And it's important for us to be that trusted third party. So we really feel like trustworthy and caring go together. Our second values are knowledgeable and trailblazing. we were always called the Met experts, and we really don't think expert is a bit pompous. It's more important that we've, read the manual, we've done the research, we understand the standard, and then we also are moving the industry forward. So that's the trailblazing aspect of being knowledgeable and trailblazing. And so that means having the outdoor test lab, and everything we're now doing at the PV test lab really falls into that category as well.
Right.
And then the last two are nimble and meticulous. And I think that points to the quality discussion that you and I were having earlier, as well as the idea that we're a small company and we have to be nimble. And the way we've really been successful is like listening to those customer needs and really trying to act upon them quickly. So we have to remind ourselves a lot to be nimble and not get kind of in our own way and in our own processes, So that nimble and meticulous, I feel like goes together. You want to be both, so.
Did you have like a long list and then you had to narrow it down to 6? Like, how do you get to that?
That was a first charge that Steve had when he came on board, my COO, Steve Knapp, in 2019. And I look out at our conference table because I just remember us sitting there with the whiteboard and collaborating and going through and talking through the ideas. But yeah, I can't remember how many we started with but ended with.
How long did it take?
We did that over the course of probably 2 or 3 weeks and working sessions. And then,
Nice.
and then getting a lot of alignment too. That's Steve's favorite word. Are we aligned? Are we?
Yeah.
So making sure you get a lot of, buy-in and alignment from everybody in the company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Alignment is really important. I think it's important that once a company has solidified the cultural values and norms that they do get reinforced. I'll tell you one quick example. I think we've talked about this before. So one thing that comes from being able to have solid cultural values that everyone is both familiar with and aligned with, sort of bought into, is that there's never really an opportunity for someone to take criticism personally. It's not the boss thinking you're doing a bad job. It's not someone singling you out or making fun of you, per se. And especially makes it a lot easier for leadership to help provide guidance rather than correction in a team. Because if someone is not exhibiting meticulous as a cultural value, right? Like they've produced something too quickly. They've overlooked details not once, twice, but 3, 4 times. Then you can easily say, hey, look, I do keep harping on this, that, got grammar errors and you've missed this thing that's really important for clients a couple of times now. And I just want you to understand that does not uphold our value of meticulous. And so I want you to understand where the standard is. And like, this is a boundary. And if you continue to kind of come outside this boundary, you're breaking a cultural value. And I can't let you do that, because then everyone else thinks that we don't actually believe that these are true. And they are true. So yeah, I had a coaching client that when we reframed a particular employee problem they were having around this framework, it went from him sort of being stifled for about 2 weeks of kind of him and haw, and I kept saying over and over, like, why haven't you addressed this? Why haven't you approached it? To that day, before the end of the day, he had the conversation with the employee, put the employee on a correction plan, and everybody was on the same page. But the good news for him was that he already had this framework in place. It's much harder for companies that haven't established these norms, these values. They haven't written them down. They haven't communicated them.
The same with mission, vision, and goals, right? Like so setting, so then you can. So somebody might say, well, this is my pet project, this is my baby, but what if it doesn't align with the goals and therefore the mission? Well, so you can prioritize things in that, in those types of frameworks, right? They're so much. There's so much more useful beyond like the business school, right? Like, original charge.
Do you know if the vision is so clear at GroundWork that everybody on the team can say it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What is it?
Yeah. So we're accelerating the success of utility scale solar.
Nice.
So the idea of success means, right, that we used to say accelerating the adoption of utility scale solar. That's our mission. Was our mission, and but we really have seen the adoption. So now it's about the success, and that really extends farther into operations, and right, it has a much more lasting view.
And that ties to what's the vision then? A world where every
our
utility
vision
scale
right
solar
now
project.
is not as well known or defined because we've been actually working on that because we're evolving it.
Yeah.
So we want to be, exactly. So we want to be the premier provider of the solar reference data. So that's a vision that we're really starting. We just did corporate strategy sessions, in Q1, and then this will be part of a rollout that will occur over the course of this year. So so the vision is not as well known.
It's good. Yeah, but it will be.
Yeah. Oh, it will be. Oh, yeah. And we're making at an executive level the moves, right, to start working towards the vision and have the board's buy-in. So that's that's part of growing up, Nico. I'm growing up over here.
In the year since you graduated to full grown company.
Yeah.
What do you feel are some of the hard-won lessons, some things that now looking back, you're like, wow, I didn't even know I needed to be this or know this or do this, in the process leading up to bringing Limerock on? How have you evolved?
Yeah, I think the best thing has been really having the board as a forcing factor for setting goals and then achieving goals. So I think that's like that. I think, from just having a board is a fantastic forcing factor. Yeah. So I should have had something along those lines. Otherwise it's like, it really ends, it starts and ends with me, whether or not we achieve stuff, right? Now I have a team to look up to and then kind of, and then turn back around to my team and say, hey, this is what we said we're going to do. Let's go do it. Right. So,
sure.
I think that is, in addition to the capital, it really changes the trajectory of the company in a significant way.
Anything else in terms of like how you approach leadership or how you've been mentored in the last year that has really impacted you?
Well, it's interesting. Once you're in and you have an investor, you can look at everything under the guise of, hey, could we partner, acquire, merge, right? It really changes how you look at all of the parties, the counterparties in your ecosystem. And I think at the end of the day, and I've always thought about that in solar anyway, is that you're not really competing. We're all really working towards that same goal of I think everybody's really trying to accelerate the success of solar, right? And so you can see things as different opportunities. I think once you have investment capital, whereas I would be maybe like a little bit more guarded or scared to talk about our plans or, and now I'm like, hey, let's talk, right? Like, let's, there's got to be a way we can do business together,
Right. So you definitely have a lot more confidence and and it gives you also when you have a partner behind you like Limerock that has a bigger checkbook, it gives you that confidence too that things can get worked out. Like we might see ourselves as competitors, but we've got this lane that we're running in. We see you running in this other lane. Is there a way that they're collaborative? I get that.
Combined forces, it's fun. Yeah. And that's really fun. Yeah. Yeah. Limerock New Energy is, I just want to say it's Limerock New Energy, right? So just to put the plug in. So,
okay.
Yeah.
For anyone who's Google searching it.
Yes.
I don't know how many Limerocks there are out there. There must be a number.
Well, there's a large PE firm that was actually on the oil and gas side.
Really? Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they were kind of founded out of that.
So for all you oil and gas folks, we're not talking about that Limerock.
Exactly.
Good. Given that you created effectively the category that you dominate now, I have to imagine that there's a lot of language, a lexicon even around how you operate and the things that you do that are different. They have to teach people. Is there anything that you have sort of created or carved out as the language of the industry that maybe was introduced by GroundWork or that you for sure own as a terminology?
Yeah, I think on the resource assessment side, certainly we have, we are known for tuned data by providing ground data that then is tuned with satellite data. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Actually, our data tunes the satellite data.
I think that it is noteworthy that you effectively created this concept that your partners are now able to brand and productize.
Absolutely. And so
Cool.
what that is by taking a 1 to 2 year data set, our satellite partners are able to tune the satellite data set using that 1 to 2 year overlapping data set. And that's something certainly was novel and brought to market by GroundWork and Clean Power Research around like 2013, 2014.
That's fascinating. I love it. Tuned. What did you call it?
Tuned.
Tuned like a piano. You tune a piano. Tuned data set. Okay.
Yeah. So what you would see is you'd have that overlapping period of satellite data and ground data, and they would understand the biases in the satellite data from having taken the ground data set.
That's fantastic. I mean, that should, it seems logical, but people weren't doing it. It's obvious in retrospect, right? Hindsight's 2020.
And obviously, uncertainty reduction of solar resource is a big part of it, right? The idea that we were taking these high-quality measurements using low uncertainty instruments, which is the pyranometer. And I do feel that GroundWork was instrumental in bringing the pyranometer into the utility-scale solar industry.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me because pyranometer is a word I learned back when the California Solar Initiative came about because they required revenue grade meters and things like that as a part of the process. And there were monitoring companies introducing, plane of array irradiance testing through pyranometers. And not everyone had them. I remember some of the earlier monitoring companies, and we started to standardize around them because one of our early PPA providers, Solar Power Partners, required them on all their projects. And it was fascinating to me to hear that even in that, I mean, that was like 2007. So it was fascinating to me that utility scale projects weren't doing what like commercial industrial installers were doing.
Yeah. You know? So SCE and CAISO required them, right? First goes California, then goes the rest of the United States. And so and we were here. So I would say we popularized them, right? So then we kind of brought them across. So.
When you look back over the course of your tenure as a CEO, founder, was there any advice that you got early on that now in retrospect you look at it as foundational insight? It really helped assure the success of your company?
You know, I got advice one time that was, we were having a bit of a downturn and I wasn't really sure, where, where the company was going to, how the company was going to land and, would I make that payroll like we were talking about? And I just remember talking to a friend of mine and mentor, and he just said, "Ann, you just got to keep the lights on. You just got to keep the lights on." I was like,
keep the legs on.
Lights on. Lights on. Right.
Yeah. You said legs.
Lights Yeah. And
keep the lights on.
And keep the lights on. Keep your door open. Right. So there's that. He also said to me one time, and I was hiring Darren Prock and as my CFO. And I was like, how can I afford him? Going back to that original story, like you got to be able to afford somebody before you can hire them. And I was really kind of on the fence about it. And I was talking to him about it. And he was like, it sounds like he just agrees with you too much. Like you're too alike. Like you need to hire somebody that really challenges you. And I totally didn't take his advice. I was like, no, like I need like somebody's got my back. Right?
That's awesome.
And so I hired Darren and he's had my back ever since, like, thick and thin.
I love that actually as a counterpoint of like having a mentor, but still having the spine to do something that the mentor advised against. Right? Because you believe in it, because I do. You have it. This is what I feel. I'm really glad you point that out because I see far too often folks that will take advice as instruction rather than suggestion, right? The person giving you advice rarely has as much data as you do. They're simply giving you a point of view, a perspective. And it's often true that perspective, being outside of the weeds that you are mired in, can see outside that forest. It can help you see the forest for the trees, right? So, but all too often someone will get sort of advice from a mentor or someone they perceive to be smarter, more experienced, and they'll take that advice, and it's ill-fated advice if that person doesn't really understand in particular the interpersonal dynamics and the culture of the team that you've built. If all they see is the data around the business model, not the people that are building the company, which is a really important factor.
But I will say 3 years later, when I hired my COO, Steve Knapp,
Yeah.
I guess I could afford at that point in time to have somebody that would be, that would really challenge me constantly.
Totally.
Right. And
Yeah.
so having that person is important too. So I eventually took his advice. It took 3 years.
Outside of meteorological data sets and yield curves and the latest in the latest in module testing, et cetera, what do you nerd out about when you're not thinking about these things?
Right now, like top of my mind is my daughter's college admissions.
Oh yeah.
So I'm nerding out about like universities and what, and it's such a amazing thing to do because, we remember going through the process of selecting our school. And there's 3,500 different universities in the United States, right? Like, so, and it's such a big decision. It's like such a trajectory of a decision.
Yeah.
And I'm just loving starting very, very early in the process of starting that with Lucia. And I couldn't, and I'm geeking out on all the stats and how the different schools approach learning and how she's going to kind of make that call. Because I made the call just, by a feel, right? Like, as people sometimes do, or, I think she's a very, very thoughtful young woman. I think she's going to take into consideration a lot of factors.
It's hard for parents as well to remember that the decision isn't ours. So many parents want to make the decision for their kid, or in quotes, air quotes, with their kid. Right.
Mm-mm.
But
they make the call.
Yeah. It's so easy to be unduly influencing a decision that will affect the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. And I'm just trying to keep everything wide open,
I can imagine a world where like Lucia is having a coffee or tea or just breakfast with you, and she's like, I'm thinking about this, and through your head is this deluge of data. And you're like, how do I talk about the things I want to talk about without being a helicopter mom? Oh my God.
Oh, but the best thing you can do, and I think I hopefully don't fall into the helicopter mom category, is just how you can get just more quiet in your parenting as your kids get older. Like, you don't have to say that right now. You don't have to,
right.
What's on your mind. Is what you're saying really something that's going to help that, person right now as they're going through their journey, so.
Someone who manages a team of 100 plus people comes up with new strategies for how to communicate. That's for sure.
For sure. So the other thing I just love to do, which is not, nerding out or geeking out, I just love to cook. You and I talked about cooking. We're talking about cooking. We always talk about cooking whenever we're talking, right?
Yeah, we are.
So I still that's my big turnoff thing every night. Like, and sometimes I question myself, like, I'm home cooking like a big meal at like 7:00 on a Tuesday after a full day of work. It's like this, there's just something for me about that ritual that kind of turns the work brain off and turns the home brain on, and I just love it's meditative to me to be chopping, and cooking and listening.
I wouldn't say that I love cooking, but I love the formula, like the fact that it can be ritualistic, it can be algorithmic, even like a recipe is a formula. It's really straightforward. I like to, unlike my wife who likes variety, I like for the food that I liked last time to taste the same this time. So I love recipes. When I found out that there were recipes, I was like, this is amazing. When I was a Peace Corps volunteer, we had a Peace Corps volunteer cookbook that kind of traveled the world, but it seemed to get printed in the office and like bound in the office for Peace Corps volunteers that wanted it. But that's where I really sort of learned to cook and cook with different ingredients. I'm curious, are there particular types of foods, like sort of cultural foods, or et cetera, that you default to or lean towards?
No, I run the full gamut. I really do.
What's the most interesting thing you've cooked lately?
California is so fresh and so good. I did like
what's
a beautiful
braised
chicken this weekend, like that just
braised.
Yeah, like a braised chicken and rice that just came out like just perfectly.
Right.
I was so happy with it. I like cooking with greens. I like cooking with greens. I'm just all about like, how can I, nutritious plus, right?
But I came home. Betsy likes to do this. She'll like go buy stuff and like leave it on the counter, and she'll say, "This is what's for dinner," and it's my job to make it dinner. And so
that's awesome.
I did a
That's good.
tofu.
I love that. Hey, this is what's in the kitchen, or this is what's in the fridge, or in the pantry.
That's how we cook.
What can I make out of that? Yeah,
we don't go to the grocery store and like pick out meals.
No, we don't.
But Betsy she'll pull it out and she's like, "Hey, this is what's for dinner." And then I made a tofu stir fry, which I'd never made before, and I did it with pan fried rice noodles, and it was fantastic. And my wife was like, "I don't think the kids are going to eat this," and they loved it, which is amazing. Like to watch their preferences evolve.
My son Dom, he cooked for his dad and a friend of his dad's one time.
Yeah.
And just in the past month, comes home and he's like, "Mom, there's nothing like it when people go and get seconds of the food that you made."
Isn't that true?
And I was like, "Dom, that's a story of my life."
That's awesome. I can tell you, what's interesting as business owners is I equate that as well to return customers. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like, man, I totally get it when that dopamine hit when somebody goes back to the kitchen, or my pickiest kid when he says, "Can I get seconds?" Oh yeah, because dad cooks seconds, mom doesn't cook seconds. That's the other secret. My wife does not, for whatever reason, cook with the seconds in mind, with like 3 growing teenagers in mind. It's like barely enough for us to all eat. Which is great for moderation and diet, but my kids love it when I cook. Okay, couple more
with 3
things.
boys, it's like rice bowls, big time, like big green bowls.
Yeah, gotta get carbs. I was raised in the South, so I try to avoid the "where's the meat" conversation because while we are carnivores, we're not vegan or vegetarian, and I don't have any problem with any of those diets. I don't want my kids to feel like they are like every meal has to have X, Y, Z, right? I grew up in that very rigid Southern environment where it was like dinner has starch and meats.
And they're all in their own spots on the dish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like breakfast is a certain kind of food. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like that, I grew up very, like it was rigid, like breakfast is a very certain kind of food. Like we have breakfast for dinner all the time, even cereal. If we, the kids love it too. That's a good thing about variety.
We call that crazy dinner. We call that crazy dinner.
Oh, that's awesome. A lot of these I think equate to, and we don't often enough as leaders translate them to team building exercises, like cultural building exercises. Because if you think about the application of you need rigid structure in a company, but then if you make it so rigid that like you can't have breakfast food at dinner, that kind of thinking can't be a cultural value, right? Or else you can't grow. So speaking of growth, I believe that readers are leaders and leaders are readers. I know that you have listened to the show a lot, so you know that I ask these questions. Hopefully you came prepared. I'm curious what book or resource in particular within the energy sector you feel like is a absolute must read. It's something that sits as like an essential resource besides SunCast.
Besides SunCast, I was going to say.
Yes.
No, I mean, Latitude Media is doing great things right now, right? Like, so I eat that up.
Shout out.
And shout out to those guys and their
what
podcast too, with Jigger.
What in particular around Latitude, like their writing, their AI stuff?
Yeah, it's just top of mind. Like I'm reading their newsletter every day. And then PV Tech, of course, like just to keep up with everything that's going on in the industry. I'm doing this.
And books, are you more of a fiction or an autobiography kind of reader?
I'm more of a fiction reader.
Yeah. So what fiction book have you read more than once?
Super Sad True Love Story. And I'll have to get you the author of that.
It's called Super Sad True Love Story?
Yeah. It was written in 2006 and it was wildly, it was kind of like, a not too distant future. And it's amazing how many things have come to fruition from that book. I love that
Gary
book.
Steingart.
Yeah. Really, really good book. read that one a couple
Fun.
times. Yeah.
There's a Talks at Google talk where he talks about the book.
Yeah.
Sweet. I think it's
Pretty
been recommended
wild.
once
He
before.
really predicted iPhone, people not in real life, like just looking at their phones all the time. And way before, even like Facebook was, prevalent, or all the social media.
This is wonderful. It says, New York Times bestseller, a deliciously dark tale of America's dysfunctional coming years and the timeless and tender feelings that just might bring us back from the brink.
Yeah. It also
That's cool.
Well, I don't want to give it away. Everybody should read it.
Mm-hmm.
But Cameron and I always something will happen and we'll be like, oh my God, that was so super sad true love story.
That's good. Well, so beyond super sad true love story, are there any other books that you recommend or gift?
I really like The Short Flywheel by Jim Collins, right? It's all about like virtuous circles. And I think I like short business books, like good podcasts, so.
Yeah, sorry, I don't do short podcasts.
No, that's okay. I like long form podcasts, like when you're in a car,
Yeah.
Right now I am like geeking out on like the whole protein strength training for women as they get older and all the podcasts around that. Yeah, there's just a lot of good content right now around that.
Oh, I bet there is.
Yeah.
Is there a habit or consistent practice that you feel like is giving you a lot of leverage in your life? Maybe it's a morning routine or something else?
Yeah, so I do kettlebell in the morning 2 to 3 times a week. So that really helps me just with strength and feel good. I actually walk my dog up this huge hill in the morning, first thing in the morning, and turn around and look over at the big 270-degree view of the ocean. That's just kind of behind my house. So it just gives me some clarity to see just like the vast expanse.
Totally.
You can see, where it is, Nico, so you can see like Point Lobos and out. And, yeah.
You don't have to explain it any further. I'll continue to get deeper jealous and
and then on Sundays I ocean swim at 9:30 in the morning. You'll find me ocean swimming.
Is there a group of people, or are you swimming alone?
Yeah, it's like this, it's a little communal group that meets, and we get out in the ocean. And I wear a wetsuit, but there's a lot of cold water swimmers that don't wear wetsuits. But we get about 30 to 40 minutes in, just head straight out from Lover's Point. Yeah, and
that's great. You get out to Lover's Point.
Yeah, we call that the reset, right? It's like, all the endorphins that come from that activity is just out of control. Really sets you up on a Sunday for the rest of the
I love that. This interview has really made me reminisce a lot and think about the days that we lived alongside you and your family in Pacific Grove, Monterey. Oh,
one thing I still run, Nico, and
you do.
And
that's right. We had that in common. We ran hood to coast
we did have
together.
that in common. But you said to me, talk about advice taken. You were like, "Don't break on the downhills."
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's good advice for life, right?
Yeah, that's good. That's true. It's true.
That's a good point.
That's so interesting. Gosh, I forgot that one of the ways that we did bond back in the day, and also how I met our now mutual close friend Jeff Brown, was through our running and my time spent in Oregon. Good memories. And I am beyond attending PVPMC or becoming a customer. How could folks best engage with you? Do you write? Do you show up on social media or anywhere? Are there ways that folks can engage with the GroundWork team?
Yeah, we're on LinkedIn, of course, right? So just Ann Will on LinkedIn, PVPFC, our website. So any of those ways are the best ways to reach me.
Last question, Ann. If you could leave every person you meet with one thing, what would it be?
I think right now we're in a period of time where it's like everything's a zero-sum game. And it's like, if I win, you lose, right? And honestly, this world should be a win-win world, right? We're only here for a short period of time. This planet's going to be here a lot longer than we're going to be here. And our children are going to be here and their grandchildren, just look for win-win opportunities. It doesn't have to be like I lose, you win, I win, you lose,
Yeah.
And look for people in your life that are that way,
Yeah. Oh, and I hope that lots of people get to meet you. I'm glad to introduce you to folks in the SunCast community who don't know you. I hope that they will come up to you somewhere and say, hey, Ann, thank you for inspiring me. I honor you and I'm grateful for the time that you've invested in helping make this interview possible and for the energy you've invested in helping make revenue grade utility scale reference data possible. Thank you, and appreciate you coming out on the show finally.
Nico, you've single-handedly coined the term solar warrior, and you've been at it for as long as I have, if not long, actually longer. And I couldn't be more grateful to you for getting all the wonderful voices from this revolution out there. So thank you.
Thanks, my friend.